What's going on, guys, and welcome to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for March 4th, 2022. I am Graham G.S. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great weekend so far. Tonight is WWE's Madison Square Garden return, the big house show. Brock Lesnar defending the WWE Championship, which was brought up quite a few times by Roman Reigns here on SmackDown from last night. I will not be there. I was actually at their last house show the night after Christmas and had a very fun time. The attendance was probably the lowest I have ever seen it by far. I think that was actually proven with the numbers that came out after the fact. That was when COVID kind of came back. The product's been stale for a while, so I can't really say that I'm surprised. But it was a fun time, and tonight should be no different. Like I said, I won't be there, but SmackDown was a good show on Friday. This was a surprisingly fun show. I was looking forward to it going in because this was a rare instance where WWE advertised like 3 or 4 segments/matches coming into the show, and they actually delivered on all of them. Usually, there have been instances where they've advertised like 3 matches for a Raw or a SmackDown, and literally none of them happen. Or at least usually it's 1 or 2 matches are advertised and they don't actually happen, or it's an angle or whatever, or they just forget they even advertised them to begin with, or they change plans right before the show goes live. That happens on an almost weekly basis. We did not get that with this show. This was a pretty, by recent SmackDown standards, a very entertaining show by recent SmackDown standards, and an eventful episode at that. We got appearances from Johnny Knoxville. Roman Reigns was obviously there. A new Intercontinental Champion crowned. Ronda Rousey making her singles debut on SmackDown, or really any in-ring debut at all. This was Ronda's first singles match since, obviously since 2019. She's had 2 matches since being back. The Rumble and the Tag Team Match Elimination Chamber. She was in a triple threat, obviously, at WrestleMania 35. The last singles match she would have had before that, maybe when, I think they did a Beat the Clock challenge with her, Becky, and Charlotte, I remember, right before WrestleMania. I want to say it was against members of the Riot Squad. If not, I remember her facing Dana Brooke very briefly on Raw right before WrestleMania. She had a rematch with Ruby Riott, I remember, following Elimination Chamber or Fastlane or whatever it was. And they had a really good match on Raw, I remember. But that would have been 3 years ago, and I thought she looked fine on the show. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But as far as this show is concerned, it was a very, by SmackDown standards, an eventful show. We got an appearance from Austin Theory, setting up a match at WrestleMania, as we expected. Thankfully, not with Vince McMahon, with Pat McAfee, but rather Pat McAfee versus Austin Theory. So that was cool. Knoxville and Sami Zayn announced for WrestleMania. So, again, by SmackDown standards, an eventful episode, and a SmackDown Tag Team title match that was also quite good for the time given. So let's get right into it. They actually opened the show by having several people cut promos quickly. They used to do this back in the day. They'll do this from time to time. AEW, I feel like, has done it previously as well, but WWE does this every once in a while, where you'll see everyone that's like in a match scheduled for the show, and you'll hear from them for like 10 or 15 seconds from each person. And they did that with Sonya, Ronda, Sami, Paul Heyman, obviously not in a match, but he was on the show later on, among other people. And they actually opened the show with the Intercontinental Championship matchup, Sami Zayn defending against Ricochet. Now, I'm almost positive I said in last week's review, there is no chance Ricochet wins. What a joke to think he would win. But then it kind of dawned on me after hearing other people speak about it and really starting to think about it myself. It made more sense to have Ricochet win the bell. I figured it would just be a filler match to advertise something simply for the sake of advertising something for this week's SmackDown to get people to tune into the show. But then the more I thought about it, and after what they did on SmackDown last week with Sami Zayn attacking Johnny Knoxville, it made perfect sense to have Knoxville cost Zayn the title to have Sami agree to face Johnny Knoxville at WrestleMania. It made perfect sense. And listen, I love Sami. This was his 3rd Intercontinental title reign. The first one didn't last too long. He only held the championship for about a month or so. He had that title defense, actually, successful title defense at WrestleMania 36 that people forget about. Him and Daniel Bryan had a pretty good match, but he had to have the championship taken away due to just being away due to COVID. And then he came back, regained it at Clash of Champions, or whatever they call it, in September, and had about a 3-month reign where he had matches with Jeff Hardy, Big E, among other people on TV, Daniel Bryan, if I'm not mistaken. So, he's already kind of had his time with the championship. I was more so looking for a babyface to win the championship so someone could take it from said babyface, and so Sheamus could take it from that person. That's why I wanted Sheamus to beat Nakamura for the championship to begin with. I already figured Zayn would be tied up with Knoxville at WrestleMania. When they continue that stuff coming out of the Rumble, and it was always rumored to culminate at the Rumble and not extend beyond that, and it didn't, I figured, okay, as we all did, they're probably having a match at WrestleMania. And as I said last week, that match does not need to be for that championship. Yes, the championship means nothing at this point. It's really just a prop belt. The recent reigns of Nakamura and Cruz have done nothing to help that championship. Zayn held the belt for all of 2 weeks, but he should have. I think Ricochet was probably the perfect person to take the belt off of Sami. If it wasn't Ricochet, I would say Cesaro, if he was still around, had he not left a little over a week ago, had his contract not expired. For what it's worth, and it's really not worth anything, but his profile is still on WWE.com SmackDown roster. Usually they're pretty quick to take people off the roster when they're not there anymore. Like when Toni Storm quit or whatever happened there, I'm pretty positive they took her profile off the SmackDown roster pretty fucking quickly. When they release people, pretty fucking quickly. Even when contracts expire, they move people's profiles off the active roster pretty quickly. They didn't do that with Adam Cole, to be fair. When Adam Cole left, his profile was still on the NXT roster page, and he was never going to go back to NXT. It was either main roster or AEW, really. And it wasn't until after he showed up in AEW that they finally took his roster page off of, took his profile off the NXT roster page. Maybe if Cesaro shows up at Revolution tomorrow, that's exactly what's going to happen. I don't know. But either way, Cesaro would have been fine fit. I mean, the guy was in the company for 10 fucking years. He did have a previous reign as United States champion, but, that was a good reign. He held the championship for quite a long time, actually, like around 8 months or so he held the championship for. But Cesaro's gone. And they have almost next to no baby faces on SmackDown. Nakamura at this point, that reign was just absolutely never put that belt back on Nakamura again. I'm sorry, never do it again. So you had Nakamura, Jeff Hardy's gone, Drew's busy with Corbin, and then you have Ricochet. So listen, I love Ricochet. I think Ricochet's great, obviously. The guy's very, very talented. One of the best in the company in ring-wise. This was a very fun match. I thought the way they executed it with Knoxville coming out, costing Zayn the championship, giving Ricochet the big win, made for a great moment, made for a great reaction. The fans were happy to see it. The thing with Ricochet that I am concerned about, I wouldn't get my hopes up too high for anyone thinking, oh, this is the resurgence of Ricochet. This is where he starts to get pushed and utilized correctly. The guy has been on the main roster for 3 years. In the company for 4. He was in NXT for about a year. Came up in February of 2019. 3 whole... I'm not talking about a year, not even 2 years. 3 whole years. This man has been on the Raw and SmackDown rosters, and they have literally done next to nothing with this guy. I mean, I can go on for 30 minutes talking about every opportunity they squandered with Ricochet, but you look at what they've done and haven't done with this guy since he showed up on Raw 3 years ago. Started off in the tag team with Aleister Black, had a lot of fanfare, a lot of momentum, and the tag team was great, but I actually didn't mind the idea. I actually liked the idea of breaking them up and putting them on separate shows. Black went to SmackDown, Ricochet stayed on Raw, because they should have been utilized on their own at that point. It just made sense. And, he wasn't doing a whole lot coming out of WrestleMania, but then he won the United States Championship from Samoa Joe at the Stomping Ground pay-per-view. Stomping Grounds pay-per-view in June. Lost it within a month to AJ Styles, which was fine. I'm thinking, okay, AJ can win it, turn heel, Ricochet can get it back. He never got the championship back. He lost every subsequent rematch to AJ Styles. Every single match that he had with AJ, he lost every single one. And then I honestly couldn't even tell you what they did with him from there. He lost the King of the Ring tournament later that year, was barely featured on television, and if he was doing a whole lot of nothing. He had that 90-second squash with Brock Lesnar in Saudi Arabia for the WWE Championship. That was an absolute waste. I don't even know if he was at WrestleMania 36 in the Thunderdome. He did team with Cedric Alexander for a little bit. That didn't really go anywhere. They didn't really do much with those guys. They actually had Alexander turn heel on Ricochet, and Ricochet was like the Hurt Business's bitch for a couple of months. Again, just from there, doing a whole lot of nothing. I mean, I know he was briefly involved in the United States Championship picture last year, right before fans returned to the buildings. Never won it. Got moved to SmackDown, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a great opportunity to really revamp Ricochet. I mean, I was at the SmackDown, one of the first SmackDowns after the draft. I think it was the SmackDown right before Survivor Series. He was involved in a very fun four-way, I think with Sheamus, Cesaro, Drew, or Jinder maybe it was. I don't remember. I think it was Jinder. And I think Sheamus wanted to qualify for Team SmackDown. And they did nothing with him. The guy's barely been on the show. He's briefly feuded with Sheamus and Ridge Holland. They had a million fucking matches together. So the idea of another Sheamus Ricochet match at Mania, that's where they're going, doesn't exactly excite me. In the ring, it could be great, but the problem is that we've already seen it a million times. And it would probably wind up on the kickoff show, on the pre-show. I mean, why wouldn't it, you know? But anyway, I'm happy that he's champion. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great. I don't want to sound overly negative here, but I don't want people to get too optimistic that they're finally going to start pushing Ricochet as a top babyface on SmackDown. Let's not get it twisted. The whole report, he's the second slotted babyface on the show. Yeah, because everyone else left. Cesaro left. Jeff Hardy released. Hit Row gone. Drew's up there. Brock's not a full-timer. So I guess by default, it does make Ricochet the second top-tier babyface on the show. I mean, I guess Nakamura would be up there as well. That's a sad state of affairs on SmackDown. Not that Ricochet can't fill that role, but the problem is that he has been booked so badly for so long now, it's almost impossible to care. I mean, I can't sit here and say he's going to have this great reign when we just had the reigns of Apollo Crews and Nakamura where they did absolutely nothing as champion. Big E had a very good reign, but that was Big E. They've shown interest in pushing Big E before. He went on to become WWE champion later on in the year. Ricochet will never be a world champion in this company. I'm shocked he even got another championship reign at all. Maybe to keep him happy. If his contract's coming up, who knows? But listen, I'm happy for him. This was a cool moment. This was exactly what it needed to be as far as setting up Sami and Knoxville for WrestleMania without the championship involved. I'm not even convinced Ricochet will be 100% at WrestleMania, but maybe they do a ladder match. Who fucking knows? They're already doing a ladder match at TakeOver. Fuck it. Do another one at WrestleMania. They overload in the ladder matches constantly every year anyway, so why the hell not? But still, we'll see where it goes. I'm not optimistic at all. I'm just trying to be realistic here when it comes to Ricochet. But it was a cool moment, and if nothing else, it's another name I have to add to my list of people to sign my replica Intercontinental Championship. So there is that. We had Pat McAfee at ringside, obviously one of the commentators, talking about having Vince on his show on Thursday, which was really good, by the way. I haven't really had much of a chance to comment on it. I recorded Wrestle Rant Radio with RJ before it aired, but I actually really enjoyed it. Didn't agree with everything Vince said, obviously, but the way he came across for the most part, letting his guard down, he went for a while. It was like a 90-minute interview. Gave him way more time than I thought he would, probably double what I thought it was going to be. Answered some questions, gave some real interesting answers, for better or for worse, broke some news, and announcing that he's going to be inducting The Undertaker into the Hall of Fame, and that Pat McAfee's having a match at WrestleMania. Now, I talked about this last week here on the show, I think, because the news had already been out by the time I recorded my SmackDown review last week. Didn't exactly have a lot to do with SmackDown itself, so I don't know if I actually mentioned it or not. The whole Pat McAfee, Vince McMahon thing. Thankfully, it does not look like, unless it's going to be a handicap match, that Vince is facing Pat at WrestleMania. They actually confirmed with the graphic after the show went off the air. It will indeed be Austin Theory who came out to the ring to confront Pat, slapped him across the face, and walked off. And then Pat kind of went off. He was all pissed, saying he doesn't even know who Austin Theory is, which, I mean, the guy, he was mentioning fucking TNA on a show on Thursday. Clearly he watches the product. He's a fan. Even if he didn't know who he actually was, I wouldn't have had him say that anyway. It kind of discredits Austin Theory, even though he's a Raw guy, but whatever. It was a fine angle, sets up the match. It's not that it's filler, because I think this can end up being a fun match at WrestleMania. If McAfee can really put in the training time, and I'm assuming this was a shoot, like he literally was not confronted about the idea of wrestling until Vince brought it up to him. He probably had an inkling of an idea when it was brought up online. I mean, that's how things usually work. When shit gets reported online, that's usually when the first time the wrestlers are hearing of it, if it involves a match they have coming up or a spoiler or whatever. So that wouldn't surprise me. We got a month till Mania. If he can really put in the work between now and then and have a great match with Austin Theory, a lot like he did with Adam Cole back at TakeOver 30, I think it was, then I'm optimistic. Because that Cole McAfee match was one of my guilty pleasures from that Thunderdome performance era of WWE NXT. So we'll see what he can do. It's definitely one of those matches where it's like, listen, our roster is so depleted, we have to rely on Johnny Knoxville, Logan Paul, fucking Pat McAfee, who I love, don't get me wrong, but you got to rely on a commentator to fill out the card for WrestleMania because all these other people have left, or they just don't mean anything. Like the fact that we're getting a McAfee match at Mania before an Intercontinental Championship match is even announced, let alone getting any indication that we're going to be getting one at WrestleMania, is pretty bad. But again, that's kind of what I expect from WWE at this point, so why even getting angry over it? Because I feel like I've done that a million times before. So this was fine. Theory should be a nice opponent for McAfee at Mania. Maybe Vince will be ringside. Maybe I really do not want to see it turned into a handicap match. Vince should be nowhere near that ring physically. If he wants to be ringside, then maybe just to hear No Chance in Hell, I would like to see it, but I do not want to see him get in the ring. It would also make no sense too, because WWE promoted the McAfee show, McMahon's appearance on that show, as if it was storyline related, and it really was with the way he presented him with the opportunity to wrestle at Mania. And then have Vince turn around and say, like, oh, you're a son of a bitch, I hate you. After the way that he came across on the show would be counterproductive. So I wouldn't even do that. I think you can just kind of do Theory and McAfee, play off the idea that Vince, favored McAfee in that interview. Theory gets jealous, slapped him across the face, and you go from there. Simple storytelling, not a match that needs to happen, but I'm fine with it. And again, if it exceeds expectations from an in-ring standpoint, even better. We get to Naomi versus Carmella, one half of the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions. Remember last week, Sasha and Naomi randomly reunited? I mean, they've kind of had some interaction in recent months. I think Sasha came to the aid of Naomi against Sonya like once, and that was it. They teased the whole boss versus Sonya thing, a storyline that would probably sell itself. Really, if they want, I was going to say they could do that as the WrestleMania match, but that would feel completely abrupt coming off of like the 6-month storyline with Naomi and Sonya that really should have culminated at WrestleMania if it's going on for this long, but whatever. So they randomly reunited last week, announced their intentions to challenge for the WWE Women's Tag Team titles. We did not hear from Sasha at all. Sasha was out there, she beat Shotzi, and that was it. We only heard from Naomi very briefly. Zelina and Carmella accepted the challenge on Raw, and because they're the tag team champions of the women's division, they can travel between both brands. They have not gone to SmackDown, I don't think, once since they won those belts back in October. I don't think we've seen the women's tag team champions on SmackDown since like the fucking summer, and I'm not even exaggerating. Because Rhea and Nikki were almost never on SmackDown. They beat Natalya and Tamina for the titles. They were on SmackDown usually, but not Rhea or Nikki. Not Rhea and Nikki. And then Carmella and Zelina really haven't been on SmackDown either. So this was the first appearance by the tag team champions on SmackDown in quite a while. Carmella lost in like 2 minutes. This was a nothing match. Not that it couldn't have been more with more time, but this is such a filler feud and such an excuse to get Naomi and Sasha on the show that it feels completely beneath both of them. I mean, listen, I would rather have them in a title match for a championship that means nothing than even a battle royal that means even less. So I guess there's that. That is a slight improvement. But this is a feud that feels completely thrown together. They're doing Sasha Banks and Zelina Vega next week like anyone gives a fuck. Naomi and Sasha are really over. Sasha looked great out there matching her makeup and hair and everything with Naomi. I thought that looked cool. We didn't even hear from Sasha. We haven't heard from Sasha since she came back. I don't know if we've heard from Sasha at all, actually. Because remember, she came back on the SmackDown right before the Rumble. I don't even know if we heard from her then. I think she just came out and laid out Charlotte or interrupted Charlotte or whatever and just posed, and that was it. Obviously, we didn't hear from her at the Royal Rumble. We have not heard from Sasha in a long time, which is pretty bizarre for a woman that's like one of their biggest stars in the entire company, male or female. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Drew McIntyre and Jinder was also more filler. This went all of 2 or 3 minutes, as it really should have. It was the SummerSlam rematch nobody asked for from last year's installment. Nobody gives a shit. A lot like no one gives a shit about Drew versus Corbin at WrestleMania. They announced that officially for WrestleMania earlier on in the week on social media, so it is indeed happening. It's not that it's not happening. We all kind of figured that for months now, and now it's official. Drew is just far above Corbin, Mahal, Madcap. This is beneath. All of these people are beneath him. So him making short work of Jinder made complete sense to me. He, disposed of Shanky at ringside. I know Drew and Jinder, both actually. I've spoken to them both in person doing interviews for SummerSlam weekend, actually. They were both pretty adamant, yeah, we can go out there and have a great match. And even after the fact, they were like, yeah, it was a fine match, but it could have been better with more time. I never really want to find out, to be completely honest with you. I know they're both going to say that because they're friends and they want that long competitive match, but Jinder is so beyond boring that I have no desire to see him in like a 5 or 10 minute match. 5 minutes maybe, but 10 minutes, absolutely not. Anything beyond that, absolutely not. He's just not that good. So Drew winning quickly, decisively was exactly what needed to happen. A nice post-match intense promo from him. But again, all of this shit is completely beneath him. That just goes to show you how bad the talent depth is on SmackDown right now, that they have him working with Corbin, Mahal, and people like that, because they don't have any better heels, and they don't really have any better baby faces either. There's kind of Drew McIntyre, and then that's it, because Lesnar is not going to be around after WrestleMania in a regular role, I would assume. We go to the Bloodline, attacking Shinsuke Nakamura and Rick Boogs. They were out there doing their usual shtick, but before they can make their way to the ring, the Bloodline come out and lay out both guys, and that was it. That was the last that we saw of Nakamura and Boogs on the show. The same two men that were attacked by Sami Zayn, and who Zayn beat for the Intercontinental Championship in Nakamura's case, that we haven't seen since. And they come back, doing their usual shtick, only to get laid out by the Bloodline, like two losers. So that was it. Roman Reigns cut a promo in the ring addressing Brock Lesnar, the unification match at WrestleMania, again mentioning Brock Lesnar's upcoming championship defense tonight at Madison Square Garden, where I don't really think anything of note's going to happen. You know, I said this on Twitter earlier, and I said this on WrestleRant Radio as well, I think, but I think there's a good chance Damian Priest wins back the United States Championship tonight at MSG to put Balor in chase mode for WrestleMania. Beyond that, I really don't expect anything major will happen tonight. Maybe there will. Maybe the championship changes hands. Maybe Cody Rhodes finally comes back. Who knows? I really don't think so. They've put a lot of money and stock into this Roman and Brock match with both belts being on the line. Would it no longer be the biggest WrestleMania match ever if they took the belt off of Brock? Yeah, it wouldn't be. I mean, it's not the biggest WrestleMania match ever anyway, but it certainly wouldn't be if they took the belt off of Brock between now and Mania. So I don't see him losing it. But this was the usual good promo from Roman Reigns, and nothing much of note else was said. I don't know what more they can do between now and WrestleMania to keep people. I mean, a lot of people have already jumped off the bandwagon for Brock and Roman. Not like a lot of people were on it to begin with. And they've had an amazing feud, to be honest. It's not a match I'm overly anticipating for WrestleMania. I am looking forward to it. It makes sense. The storyline has been building to this point. The problem is that they have been feuding for so long, consistently, since SummerSlam, that there really isn't much more to do. Heyman already did the turn. He already got fired. He already came back to Brock. They gave Brock 2 WWE title wins. They had the contract signing last week. What more can you do? I hope we get a longer verbal exchange from them before WrestleMania. I'm sure Brock will be back. They didn't advertise him for next week, but maybe in 2 weeks. You can spend 1 week doing a video package. They've done that before, and not have either man appear on the show. I hope we get a longer verbal exchange from them, because last week's contract signing was kind of underwhelming. We didn't really hear a lot from either man, at least Brock, and Brock's very entertaining in his current role. So hopefully we do, but I'm not really sure what more they can do between now and Mania. Thankfully, it's not like there's 2 months left. There is 4 weeks from today. Today is March 5th. On this Saturday in 30 days, we will have WrestleMania Night 1. So they have at least 4 more SmackDowns left. They have next week, which is the 11th, then the 18th, the 25th, and the last Friday Night SmackDown before WrestleMania. So they have 4 SmackDowns to do something. What that is, I don't know, but hopefully they can come up with something. They've gotten this far. They just have another 4 weeks to fill. The Bloodline stayed out in the ring as the Usos defended the SmackDown Tag Team titles against the Viking Raiders in the match we were supposed to get at Elimination Chamber last month. The feud has been very cold. I can't say this is a feud that I've really overly cared about. It's been kind of there. But this was a very good match. For the time they were given, they went out there, had a couple of very good near falls. The Raiders hit like a good splash off the top rope. I thought that might have been it. They hit their finisher at one point. The other Uso broke it up. Very fun match. For the time they were given, I really enjoyed this. And the Usos won, as they should have, to hold on to the SmackDown Tag Team titles. More on the Usos in a moment as far as what they could be doing at WrestleMania, but I thought this was a good match, though. We were supposed to get Biggie and Sheamus one-on-one, rekindling their rivalry from late 2020. At that point, Ridge Holland wasn't there. The New Day wasn't around for Biggie. They were already on Raw at that point. Biggie was going at it alone with Sheamus, and they had that great parking lot brawl or the Falls Count Anywhere match or whatever it was. That was a fantastic match. I was looking forward to seeing more from them here because they've always had very good chemistry together. The match never got started. Before the match even got going, Ridge Holland attacked Kofi at ringside. Kofi had driven this ATV down to the ring last week, and they drove it down to the ring here too. He was unnecessarily, constantly just honking on the horn like a fucking moron. It sounded very annoying, and Ridge Holland stopped him and attacked, and I'm thinking, is this the babyface turn for Ridge Holland? Because that just seems, that seemed like a babyface thing to do because Kofi was being very annoying. So Ridge attacks him, Biggie comes out, they brawl, blah, blah, blah. We come back from the commercial break, and Ridge and Sheamus are beating the fuck out of the ATV backstage, dismantling it, and that angered New Day to the point where next week we are getting the New Day versus Sheamus and Ridge Holland in tag team action, which that is not at all a WrestleMania match, so I'm fine with them doing it next week. Now, where do I think this is leading? First of all, the whole angle was whatever. Where do I think this is leading? Probably a multi-team match, per usual, for the SmackDown Tag Team titles at WrestleMania. The SmackDown Tag Team titles have never, ever really had a meaningful match at WrestleMania. And they've been around since 2016. But to quickly recap, it was they started in 2016, so the first Mania with the SmackDown Tag Team titles would have been WrestleMania 33. The Usos were champions at that point. They had a very good feud at that point with Alpha Academy, or American Alpha, excuse me, who they beat for the belts a week or two right before WrestleMania. They didn't even do it at WrestleMania. They did it on the SmackDown right before WrestleMania, or 2 weeks, or whatever. It was in Connecticut, and they won the belts there. The Usos instead were in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, that fucking shit, at WrestleMania on the pre-show. They weren't even defended on the show. WrestleMania 34 the following year, they were defended on the main show, again with the Usos going in as the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, and they lost it in a three-way match with the Bludgeon Brothers and the New Day. Good match, but it was only like 5 minutes. No one really cared. It was completely rushed. I feel like the Bludgeon Brothers just went in there, killed everyone, and won the belt, so it wasn't really anything notable at all. 35? Again, the Usos walking in as SmackDown Tag... You see the common theme here with the Usos? They walked in as SmackDown Tag Team Champions and retained them in a Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match when they really should have faced the Hardys, the match they did on the SmackDown after WrestleMania. WrestleMania 36, they were supposed to be defended in the Triple Threat Tag Team ladder match with Miz and Morrison, again, New Day in the Usos. Miz and Morrison walked in as the Tag Team Champions on that show. It turned into a regular triple threat when Miz got sick, so it turned into a regular triple threat, I think, with Kofi, John Morrison, and I want to say Jimmy Uso, I think. And The Miz or Morrison won that one. So, again, not a real money feud at all. It was a random triple threat tag team ladder match. Last year, they weren't even defended at WrestleMania. The Usos weren't even around at that point. But I think Jey Uso won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal on SmackDown the night before WrestleMania, night 1. And then the tag team champions, the tag team titles were defended again in a fatal 4-way tag team title match on the SmackDown right before WrestleMania. So we have never really had a meaningful match for those championships at WrestleMania. We have for the Raw tag team titles, kind of. Not really for the SmackDown tag team titles, which, whatever, they're complete afterthoughts. The Usos already beat the Raiders here. No reason to continue the feud. They won clean. I do not absolutely have zero desire to see the Usos and New Day again at WrestleMania for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. Zero interest. Even if it's a multi-man match, which I'm sure it's going to be, multi-team match, at least it's not 2-on-2. They already did the match. They already did the match at WrestleMania, or at Day 1, rather. I do not want to see it again at WrestleMania, even if it is Biggie and Kofi instead of Kofi and Xavier. Who cares? But I could see it being the Usos, Biggie and Kofi, maybe Woods if he's back, but I heard he was cleared. I don't know what's going on with Xavier Woods, King Woods. Sheamus and Ridge Holland, and probably Nakamura and Boogs, because they got attacked here by the Usos. You have the Viking Raiders, they already lost. Los Lotharios would be great, but they lost to the New Day last week. So I would assume it's going to be Sheamus and Ridge versus New Day versus Usos versus Nakamura and Boogs, because they don't know what else to do with this division. And they're just throwing people together in teams because they don't really have anything else creatively from them to do. So there you go. Ronda Rousey versus Sonya Deville in the main event. As they mentioned earlier, Ronda Rousey's first match on SmackDown of any kind, singles, tag team, anything. So her first match on SmackDown. It was really more about Rousey than it was being a competitive match. It only lasted like 3 minutes. You know, the thing is that they did this with Ronda when she was in the company the first time, but they did it differently. And I like the way they booked Ronda when she was first in the company the first time. Not that her booking recently has been bad, but when she came in 2018, she did not really wrestle on TV at all. She had that match at WrestleMania. She wrestled at Money in the Bank. She wrestled at SummerSlam and whatever, and a couple other pay-per-views. But before SummerSlam, though, she only had one televised match on Raw. And that was, like, I think the Raw right before SummerSlam, and it was against Alicia Fox. It wasn't about this competitive match. The reason they did that was because They just wanted to show Rousey wrestling on Raw and have it be a big deal and showcase Rousey right before SummerSlam. Now, that's basically what this was. They did that here before Rousey faces Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania, and that's great. I'm glad Rousey's wrestling on TV. She should be, to kind of shake the ring rust off, if nothing else. The problem is that I wouldn't want to see her squash Sonya Deville, because this is a feud I think you can go back to, and maybe they still can and will, but she beat her so decisively and so quickly here that I don't really want to see it be a full-fledged feud at this point. They're not giving Deville the same in-ring credibility she had a few years ago before she took time off from the ring. She had a very good match with Naomi on TV right before the Rumble, and Rousey killed her as she probably should have, but Rousey really, they should never have done this match to begin with. I know why it made sense coming out of Elimination Chamber and how it made sense. I mean, I know Aaliyah's a babyface, as is Rousey, but I would have put her in there with Aaliyah. Honestly thinking about it now, Shotzi. Shotzi just means nothing at this point. They had Sasha squash her last week. I would have put Rousey in there with Shotzi, because it's not like her losing quickly at this point would have really mattered. Deville, I would have saved for later down the road. And again, they could still do that, but they're kind of positioning Sonya as being this not really credible in-the-ring wrestler. And she's more of an authority figure that abuses her power. Whatever. As a showcase for Rousey, this worked. The people were into it. It was fine. Charlotte came out, and Rousey got one over on Charlotte, and Rousey ended the show standing tall. So the thing with that, though, that's interesting is that they really have not put any heat on Charlotte whatsoever. Like, literally none. They had her clip Rousey's knee last week, and Rousey was wearing a knee brace for this match with Sonya. But then she got right back up and, forced them to flee from the ring anyway. It's not like they stood tall over Rousey. And again, I understand wanting to establish Ronda Rousey as dominant, but she's been back for so long now looking dominant, where they can have her show some vulnerability between now and WrestleMania. I mean, the fans got to be able to rally behind her at some point. Especially if she is and will and should win the SmackDown Tag Team title, or the Tag Team title. Maybe that too. Not like it matters. The SmackDown Women's Championship at WrestleMania. If that's the end game here, then Charlotte needs some heat. She's established as Charlotte Flair. I get it. You should probably at least make her look like a little bit of a threat between now and WrestleMania. Thankfully, like I said earlier, you got 4 SmackDowns left before Mania. They have a couple of opportunities to do that. But if Rousey just steamrolls through Charlotte between now and Mania and then wins at Mania, Charlotte just looks like an absolute fucking loser. And if she is one, that's fine, but she's not. It's Charlotte Flair. She really should be more of a threat to Rousey than she currently is. And Rousey should win at WrestleMania. So they kind of have to give Charlotte some heat. I don't know when that's coming. It's been very one-sided so far. The feud's been fine, but they need to do more to get heat on Charlotte and make it slightly more even. If not 50-50, at least 70-30. So far, it's been 100-0 Rousey to Charlotte, so they got to make it a bit more even between now and Mania. And that was SmackDown in a nutshell. Now, I know I mentioned a lot of filler. The Biggie and Sheamus stuff with the New Day and Sheamus and Ridge didn't really do a lot for me. Drew and Jinder, who gives a shit. Naomi and Carmella was 2 minutes. It wasn't a perfect show. But with what they advertised coming into the show, I thought it delivered. And I can't really say that a lot about SmackDown lately, that it was a good, enjoyable show, but that's what this was. So I will take it whenever I can get it. I liked the Intercontinental Championship match. That was fun. I thought that delivered. We got the title change. Knoxville made an appearance. We had McAfee in theory confirmed for WrestleMania. I enjoyed the SmackDown Tag Team title match. I enjoyed the Rousey Deville showcase is basically what it was in the main event. So with what they advertised, it delivered. And I thought it was a good show. They had Roman out there talking, furthering that feud. The main stuff delivered, and even the filler, quote-unquote, at least it served the purpose. I will say that. It was far from exciting, but at least they kept matches like Drew and Jinder short and shit like that, so I appreciated that. But that was SmackDown for March 4th, 2022. I appreciate you guys for checking out my review. Thank you very much. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. We'll be back tomorrow with a Talking Smack review, and I'll be watching and enjoying Revolution from AEW on Sunday night as well. Have a great rest of your weekend, folks. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.